Hey, Alex here from Blacksheep IT Consulting. So in this series of videos, we are going to take a look at how to integrate Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Services. And of course, we're focusing here on the AI services with Siebel CRM and use the Oracle Cloud REST API to do so. So we start as usual with the demo, and then we go into great detail how to accomplish it. So here I'm looking at an activity list view in Siebel CRM. I have brought up some sample activities with comments, and you notice the little green man button that I have put in here. That's OpenUI for you. And when I click that button, the comments are evaluated as to their sentiment, and an icon is displayed depicting the sentiment. So from neutral to, well, not so good to fine or positive. So this, of course, works for the entire list. So let's navigate to the next page and click that again. And we can see the sentiment being displayed next to the comments. And the second use case I want to show is for attachments, which of course are a great resource for anything related to analyzing the document content, finding out what it is, what the document is, finding keywords in the document, etc. So I've uploaded a PDF, and my little green button here actually extracts the attachment and sends it over to OCI for document analysis. And I'm just popping up a few tidbits of the analysis here. So it identified the document as an invoice, has 2 pages, and the first few lines are also just put out here. So let's just verify that. Let's open that. And indeed, it's an invoice, and these are the lines we have seen. Great. So 2 demos for you. How to do it will follow in the upcoming minutes. So we start our journey not in Siebel actually. This is totally not about Siebel. This is about Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and I'm looking at the public Postman page of the Oracle development team, where they have published a lot, not all of them, but a lot of sample collections, APIs, descriptions for the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure REST API. So you can get going with all the information here. You find the link to this page in the description, and it's a public Postman page, so you cannot actually change anything or run anything. You have to fork it. I'm going to show you how. Let's take a look at the first page here where it says using the collections to make API calls, get OCI credentials. So calls to the OCI API are very strictly authorized. So you need to authorize each and every call separately. There is no such thing as basic authentication, of course. You wouldn't expect that. There's also, to my knowledge, no such thing as an OAuth, getting a token or whatever. You have to actually generate a sort of authorization token and encrypt that every time you make a call. So it's always different depending on the payload, etc. But first things first, you must obtain the usual suspects when you talk to OCI. So your tenancy OSID, your user OSID, your fingerprint, the private key, passphrase if the private key is encrypted. You must know your region, and you must have a compartment OSID. That's actually not always required. And you might recognize these things from being part of the configuration file that you download from OCI. When you create a user or edit a user, you can create an API key and get these details in a single file, and of course download the private key, which is what you do actually when you prepare for the standalone out-of-the-box OCI AI integration. So for instance, take this Siebel machine which we have configured for OCI AI integration, the out-of-the-box bit. And here's the OCI config file. Let's check it out. And yeah, there's all the information there. Again, remember, you download this from Oracle or you copy it from your tenancy. And here's also the private key that I downloaded placed here. Notice that the file points to it. But of course, when we make REST calls from Postman, we cannot just upload the private key or so. So that's a little bit more complicated. So when you follow any of these links here to required keys and OCIDs, that brings you to an documentation page. So let's scroll up a little bit. This is the OCI documentation with all the guides here. And you are in the developer guide where it talks about the required keys and OCIDs. And we are using, well, not really an SDK, but we are using the REST API. And this is the link which you have to click to get to the information how to generate your request signatures. So that is practically when you're not using an SDK and instead build your own client, which includes, of course, Postman or making REST requests from Siebel in general, outbound REST requests, that is. So let's go there. And here it talks about in great length, I'm not repeating all of this, about the signature version 1 that you have to use. And here are the signing steps. Of course, you must create the request, well, the HTTP post or GET request or similar. And then this is the hard part here, create the signing string, which is based on parts of the request. So it's always unique, includes parts of the requests and is encrypted. And well, it is encrypted here using the private key and RSA SHA-256. And that signature must be placed in the authorization header of the request. Now, this is not very detailed here. It's just like you have to do these things for it to work. So how can you learn how to get that to work? The whole thing about creating a signing string and encrypting it and adding it to the header, which is of course the easy part, adding something to a header. So let's take a look at examples here. And here's the language API, which I use in my demo. And I've been using the batch detect sentiments action. So as usual in Postman, when you click these collections examples, you will get well, the structure of the post requests. So this is your URL. I think that's duplicated here. And you see authorization is just says inherit. There are a few headers, which is nothing exciting here at the moment. And there is a body, which is an example body to submit. Notice I can't submit right now because I'm in the public workspace of Oracle. I have to fork that to actually test the request. So I want to get started with the OCI REST API. I want to fork that language API. So let's do it here. You can fork individual components, and one of these components is the language API. So in the menu here, you have create a fork. Okay, let's click that. And once you do that, you are prompted to enter a label. Let's call it OCI language API. I already forked that, so let me rename this to API demo. I put in my workspace, which is on a private section in the Postman cloud, and I can fork that collection. So that takes me to my workspace immediately. And so I can see the fork that I did. So this is the fork that I did. This is a fork I did earlier. So, and now I can, well, get to the same post request I want to use. And here in send, of course, I can now send this. So with the body, you might wonder, will it work? And rightfully so. And it's not working because there is a pre-request script in that collection, and there's a variable not set, tenancy, OCID, etc. So that's the trick Oracle does. They have a script which actually calculates that signature and other things and completes the request before sending it. So that hence pre-request script. So if you look into the collection itself, look into pre-request script, and here you're in for a treat because that is a complete JavaScript that runs in Postman before the request is actually sent. And as you can see, it reads some variables. So you have to set these variables. And you do that right here under, well, here or actually in an environment. So we have to fork an environment here. And you can make out that, well, here authorization string, there's a function, and, well, there's something with headers to sign. So I'm not going through all the code. You can do this yourself. And there's some extra headers for post, put, and patch. And here's, for example, an encoded hash for the body of a post request, and so forth. And here finally you have the base 64 encoded signature, and that is passed in, well, the whole response returned by this function is placed in the authorization header. You can see that here below. So it does all the magic. You might wonder, how in JavaScript can you do this thing? It actually has or includes a library, a JavaScript library called Cure. And that is brought in as a variable here, JS RSA sign, so JavaScript RSA signature. And that's in one of the variables here. And that actually looks like just the beginning of something. And that's the whole code of the thing. Yes, so Oracle downloaded this from GitHub probably and pasted in here. So that's the whole code of a library that can do this RSA encryption that is required. And this is where you can start your own evaluation. You can either choose to use a similar approach in JavaScript, for example, run it on Node.js, or inside the browser is maybe not a good idea because you have lots of secret stuff there. Or you, well, take this information that you see here and apply it to your environment, like write a Java business service, and now we're talking Siebel again, write a Java business service that accomplishes the same tasks, and stay tuned for this. So we need to be able to populate those variables here. You see that it queries the environment variables, tenancy, OCID, etc. You could mess with the script here and hard code this stuff, but let's clone an environment. So I already did that. Same procedure. You just go to the Oracle public site, you go to environments, and there's a sample environment, OCI credentials, which I cloned already. And so I have it here, and I have all these super secret stuff here. So the tenancy OCID, the user OCID, the fingerprint, the private key. The private key really is, yes, the text of the private key. So it's part of this. So keep it safe. All I'm saying, you have your region, compartment. I don't need the other stuff here. So now if I go back to collections, go back to that post request, I can set that environment and simply try to run it, and it works. So here we can see that the response has been received from OCI. So it has found out the sentiment of the text here. Great. Since this pre-request script, which again is part of the collection, which is here, is JavaScript. So it runs in the Postman cloud, of course, but you can, of course, glean some information here. For example, let's put a console log of, well, the same thing. That authorization string. Let's put a console log in here and save it. We're working local in our workspace, so that's fine. Let's open the console and let's clear it. Let's run it again. And you can see that signature string popping up, so we can analyze it a little bit further. And this is how it must look like. So some things are quite obvious and explained in documentation quite well, and other things are, of course, encrypted. So here we have the signature prefix, so to speak. There's a version number, and the key is a long string. Actually, this is the whole key. And if you look carefully, you might see that these are 3 parts separated by a slash. It's the tenancy OSID, the user OSID, and the fingerprint. So 3 things that actually are available readily in your config file or somewhere else. Then you must specify the algorithm, in our case RSA SHA 256, and a list of headers, including a pseudo header called request target, date, host, X, content, SHA 256, content type, content length. So that's the headers that are partially included in that signature. So that signature, that's the encrypted part. And the part that, as the documentation says, includes parts of the request. So in a post request, for example, it includes the encrypted body, at the length of the body and the date and so forth. So with that information, it feels secure enough to only support a single request. Well, you can resend that within 5 minutes, I think. That's the threshold. But any modification of the request would require modification of that signature string to generate it again and encrypt it again, and etc. And of course, it would require the private key you have for the same user you specify. So it's a very secure concept. Similar concepts are used on other clouds, but each cloud has their own way of expecting certain values and supporting certain algorithms, etc. So I've been searching the internet quite a while to find a generic approach to generate that authorization header for the OCI REST requests, because I wanted to find a way to make calls from within Siebel. And so I needed, well, a scripted way of generating that string. There's no standard business service that can do it. So eScript is out of the question here, because eScript is just not really equipped for RSA encryption, etc. JavaScript is a nice idea, taking all the sample code from Postman in and just literally copy paste it and run it in the browser. It should work, but that seems to be very, very dangerous, as you put all these super secret stuff in the browser where everybody who knows how to press F12 can see it. And so the solution I aimed for was to have a custom business service, but not eScript. So that leaves me with a Java business service. So, and while Googling and searching OCI REST API and signing requests and Java, I came across this blog post by Abhijit Bora, who wrote this for the Enterprise Engineering Content and Experience Services blog of Oracle in 2019, so it's been a while. And if you find the link to this in the description, and if you scroll down here, he describes all this very well. And then he goes about and, well, places the complete Java code here. So, yeah, thank you very much, Abhijit, for this hat tip to you and for sharing that information. So now I have a Java class, complete package here that can, well, here's the class OCI REST that takes the hard-coded strings here. So let's read that from the config file. Let's read the private key. It must read the private key. Here's the constructor, and there's the get API response. There's an HTTP client involved. So it basically constructs the whole request. And further down here, it's not really readable here. So we'll look at this in the next part, more closely in the next part of the demo. So make sure you watch the next video. So long story short, I ended up writing a method for my Java Business Service. Link is in the description. And that Java Business Service is an example of how you can do it. It's not the code you should be using in your production or whatever. So I have a function here, getAuthHeader, which, well, takes the already consumed config file. Here's the input property set and output property set. It's a Java Business Service after all. So I can get all these secrets, and as you can see, I can generate a date, load the private key from the private key file safely tucked in on the server. And you can see that depending on put or post or get, you have to do different things. So here an HTTP post request is created, and that post request is put through the paces in the get signature function where the magic really happens. So most of the get signature function is courtesy of Abhijit's code. So I used his code to create this Java Business Service, which can, well, get the signature using these ingredients, the API key, which is already generated, the private key, the whole request. And so it reads that request and basically pretends to send it off or prepares it to be sent, but it doesn't actually send it because I just wanted a business service that returns to me that signed request. As you can see, as it goes on through the code, it creates all sorts of headers, xdate, timestamp, and so forth, and here creates calculates the SHA-256 representation of the entire body. And here's the calculate signature. So here finally it calculates the signature and puts that into the request header. And so the returned is the ready-to-use authorization header, valid for 5 minutes. And so I make sure it's put into the output property set. So my method returns that header exactly for the request I want, along with other stuff. So the output property set is quite big. Again, this is just a little teaser, a cliffhanger of sorts. So now we have explored the REST API of Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, about that specific authorization header you have to be able to generate. We found some existing Java code, and I have used this Java code to create a Java Business Service for Siebel CRM, which calculates all these headers and returns them, not sending the request actually. You notice the send request function is just commented out for now. So how to actually send the requests in my demo? I use the browser actually. So I have the browser call this business service, get all the headers, and then in the browser do a fetch and get the stuff from OCI and process it. So now you know the secret, but I'm sure you would want to watch the next part in the series. So See you soon. Thanks much for watching. Take care and bye-bye.